Sunday school leader. I believe this prep talk is going to be a little bit shorter this week, and I'm sure you won't mind at all. Well, we're continuing in the unit that's entitled How to Share Christ. And this is the last lesson in this unit. It's called Trust God to Work out of Matthew chapter 13. The point of this lesson is to share Christ in all situations, but leave the results to God. Well, this week we have a familiar lesson to those who've been in church for a while. It's the parable of the soils. Now let's remind our class what a parable is. Well, basically, what? It's an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. It's a short story designed to emphasize a greater truth. Now, when I teach about parables, I usually state that we just need to get the overall general meaning of the parable and not necessarily need to assign each individual element of the story to something. But in this parable, Jesus explains the parable and he tells what each element of the story represents. Of course, since he's the author of the parable, he can do that. Well, I certainly hope that you are familiar with this passage already, but here's a spoiler alert. The different soils represent the different conditions of people's hearts. So why would Jesus not just come out and talk about the condition of people's hearts? Why would he tell this story instead? Well, I believe it's the same reason that Nathan came to David and told him the story of the poor man who owned sheep and the rich man who stole the sheep when trying to confront David about his sin with Bathsheba. See, a story captivates people, but facts usually bore them. In 1963, Season 3, Episode 23 of the Andy Griffith Show, it was entitled Andy Discovers America. And Opie and his friends were bored because their teacher was making them learn that boring history. But Andy told them the facts of history in a story, and it captivated the young students. See, that's the way we're wired. You'll notice this in sermons as well. Have you ever heard a sermon that was just full of facts? It's quite forgettable. But a sermon that uses a story to present the facts is quite memorable. And let's be honest, okay? I know all the Bible is necessary and needed and good, but which would you rather read? A passage out of the book of Leviticus that lists law after law about what to do and what not to do? Or a chapter from one of the Gospels? I think most of us would choose the latter, wouldn't we? Now, before you get into the parable, you might want to explain the common farming practice back in first century Palestine. You know, when we think of planting seed, we think of plowing the soil. You know, if you're a farmer, or digging a row in your backyard garden and putting the seed in the ground and then immediately covering up that seed. But in first century Palestine, the common practice was to scatter the seed by hand like that, and it would disperse all over the place, and then come back and plow the soil and cover the seed. Well, in our first set of verses, verses 3 through 8, Jesus tells the parable. A farmer went out to sow seed, and as he sowed the seed, some of the seed fell on various types of soil. Some fell on the path. Now, the path was extremely hard. It was compact. Nothing could penetrate it. It's where people walked all the time. And since the seed couldn't sprout there, the birds came along and ate up the seed before it had a chance to root, which it, of course, couldn't do. Other seed fell on rocky places, which had a little bit of soil. The seed took root and quickly sprouted, but there wasn't any room for the roots to grow, so when the sun came out, the plant withered. Other seed fell among thorns that choked out the plants as they grew, but other seed fell on the good soil and produced an exponentially fruitful crop. Now let's get down to verses 18 through 22. This is where Jesus explains the meaning of the parable. When someone hears the gospel message and doesn't understand it, it's like seed falling on a hardened path. The message is not sinking in. It's not taking root. Now, I'm sure you've had this experience in your life. Something is being told to you, but because of your attitude or feelings toward the person telling it, you're not hearing. You're not receiving the message. You don't want anything to do with it. The communication is plain. It's clear, but your attitude prevents your understanding of what's being said. And now, since the path is hard and represents the condition of the heart, we can assume that the person's heart is hard. Okay? They don't really want to hear the message. Now, yes, we as teachers, we as preachers, we need to make sure that we present the message in a format that's easy to understand. But in this parable, it's the hardness of the heart, not the seed, that prevents germination and sprouting. All right, the next soil is the rocky one. It represents a person who hears the message and they receive it, but because the soil's it's not very deep, he or she doesn't endure. Okay, when troubles come, there's no root system, and their spiritual life withers. Now, you might know some people like this. They show up at your church, they might make a profession of faith, and they're all gung-ho for the Lord, but maybe something doesn't go quite their way, or some other hardship comes into their life, and they drop out of church, and you don't see them for years. Okay? Then we get to the third soil. It's the soil that's crowded with thorns. You know, there's already plant life there. There's already stuff there competing for the soil and competing for nutrients. The seed may sprout and take root and grow, but those thorns that are already there, those worries and concerns for money, they choke out that seed. They choke out that plant. See, this is a divided heart. But Jesus doesn't want a divided heart. He wants your whole heart, your whole self. And then in our last verse, verse 23, it tells us that the one who received the seed that fell on good soil was the one who heard the word, who understood it, and it produced exponentially in their life, more than he was given. The crop yielded, it said, 160 or 30 times what was sown. Now, in today's agriculture environment, a single grain of wheat can produce 8 or more heads with 40 or more seeds per head. That's 320 times the yield. Well, keeping with the thought that Jesus wants your whole self and that the good soil will reproduce exponentially more than it was sown into it, it reminds me of John 12, 24 through 26, where Jesus likens a seed to a person, not the gospel message. And he said that unless that kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves must follow me, and where I am, my servant also will be. My Father will honor the one who serves me. You see, the life of a Jesus follower is a fruitful life. It dies to self and then reproduces itself. That is, due to their lifestyle and words, introduces people to the message of the kingdom. Well, do you remember the point of this lesson? It's to share Christ in all situations, but leave the results to God. See, it's not up to you or me to determine the condition of someone's heart. In fact, it's not only up to us, we don't have the insight, really, to determine a person's spiritual heart condition. They may have a hard heart, shallow heart, crowded heart, or maybe it's a fertile heart ready to receive God's message. We are to share Christ in all situations. We are to live the message and then speak the message. That's our job. What happens from there, it's not up to us. We do our part and leave the results to God. Well, next Sunday is the beginning of a new quarter and a new unit where we'll be looking at 7 characteristics of a church that God desires. So, think about that not only for your church, but your Sunday school class as well. All right, so don't forget to pray with and for your class. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you very much.